This is Gemara in Sotah, Daf Mem Dalid, and we're holding on Mem Gimel Amid Bees, approximately 10 lines from the white lines. First word of line is Oisrin. Says the Gemara, Ki Asar Rav Dimi Amar Rav Yochanan. Now Rav Dimi Amar Rav Yochanan is really continuing the conversation from the previous daf, which is what patters one from going to Milchama. We had a stira. On one hand, the Brisa learned that if you, different types of grafting, layering and grafting does exempt you, well the Brisa said it doesn't. So we originally yesterday went through the teretz of was it asur or was it mutter? There's different forms of grafting, some are mutter and some are not. That was teretz number one. Teretz number two says the Gemara Rav Dimi says the name of Rav Yochanan, Hamani Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov he. This, who is this din that says that it does not pater you? That's Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov. That says, Loi Amar Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov Hasam. When did Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov say his din? Kerem kimashmai is only regarding a kerem, according to the simple meaning of the word kerem. Hacha over here, nami nota kemashmai. Says the Gemara, so too over here, when the pasuk says nota, it says it was planted, is also going according to the simple meaning, which means what? So again, Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov learns the pasuk according to the literal meaning. What's the literal meaning of a kerem, of a vineyard? Says Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov, similarly with a nota, with planted, nota in mavrech umarkiv loy, and that's why Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov will be the opinion that says only if it's planted, if it's grafted, if it's layered, then it will not exempt from going to battle because it's not included in the word nota. So the Gemara answers, that's will answer up the stira. So now in classical Gemara form, once we bring down one din of Rav Dimi, b'shem Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov, actually this was, Rav Dimi, the name of Rav Yochanan, we again say similar. Says the Gemara, Ki Asar Rav Dimi Amar Rav Yochanan Yishav Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov Yalda Pechusa Mitefach Chayeves Ba'arla. A yalda, a young tree that is less than a tefach tall. What is the din? Chayeves be'arla kol shenaiseha, is obligated in arla its entire life. Why? Because it always looks like it's 1 year old, so it's the din derabanan. Arla is that it's forbidden to eat the produce in the first few years of a fruit, a tree's life. So says the Gemara, if I have something that its entire life is only one tefach big, then it's going to be pater. Why is it? Then it's going to be chayiv, because people might view it and think that it is a young tree. But continues Rav Dimi and he clarifies 3 lines from the white lines. Hanimili shtayim keneged shtayim. Which is the same concept that we saw yesterday. They have 2 trees and 2 trees, and you have one on the top. Avakule karem. But if these small trees are an entire vineyard, it's not just 5 trees, an entire vineyard of these mini trees. Kala islay, then it's going to have a call. Everyone's going to know that it's not really a 1-year-old tree, and therefore will not have this din derabanan that is chayiv in arla. We continue with another din of Rav Dimi on the last narrow line. Rav Dimi Amar Rav Yochanan, mace. What is the halacha of a mace? A mace is a toifes arba amois likriyishma. A mace literally grabs hold of 4 amois with regard to kriyishma, that you're not allowed to say kriyishma in the vicinity of the mace. The chsev, a famous halacha we know, you go to a cemetery, you don't want your tzitzis out, etc. Why? Lo yeg l'rosh cheraf. You're mocking a pauper, you're blaspheming Hashem. So by saying kriyishma in the vicinity of a mace is similar to wearing tzitzis. So says Rav Dimi in the name of Rav Yochanan, the name of Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov, this is a din of Dalit Amois around the mace. And Amar Rav Yitzchak continues the Gemara, Rav Yitzchak, Rav Yochanan ben Yaakov. And again, these are all completely random halachas, but because they're all stemming from the same source, therefore we're bringing them down over here. So it says Rav Yitzchak now, but originally it was Rav Dimi, now it's Rav Yitzchak in the name of Rav Yochanan, name of Eliezer ben Yaakov, Churgasa Hagdela Beina Achim. If we have a stepdaughter that is amongst the stepbrothers, Asura Linase La'achim is not allowed to marry the stepbrothers. Why? Because she appears to be their sister, meaning even though they're completely unrelated, and step siblings for all intents and purposes could get married, but because over here they were brought up together, therefore they're not allowed to get married one to another. But the Gemara comments and says, Lahi, Kala Islay Lamilsa. That's not true. They are allowed to get married. You're not worried about this din derabanan. Why not? Because it's a call. Everyone knows that they're not really related. And continues the Gemara of Amri, Leket Shicha Upeyosh Aisin Bigairan. We have Leket Shicha Peyo, the Manas and Niyim, which you make them into a gair and you make them into a pile. Hukbu lemaiser. If you take all these individual entities and you make one pile out of them, the halacha is they are chayiv in meiser. Even though normally like a shechad peir, of course, are pater from meiser, but people are going to think that it is a full pile, and therefore midrabanan it's chayiv in meiser. Amar Ula, but Ula explains this din like Amaran Ella bisadeh. Aval beir kolis le'lemilsaf. It's not on the field, but you take the lecha shechad peir back to your house and you pile it up there. Then beir in this city would be no longer have this din derabanan that it's chayiv in meiser. Continues the Gemara from Yisrael v'Yechon ben Yaakov in the second to last line. Yolda, a small tree of mitavach einoi mikadeshes as azraim. The word mikadeshes over here doesn't mean get married. Doesn't mean it means a form of kedusha, which means it's not going to make usher plants that are planted near it. The din of klaya karen, you're not allowed to plant different species in the same vicinity. But it says with Lazman Yaakov, if it's a small tree, it's not a problem. The Gemara comments, like we've seen, if it's an entire field, so we're seeing a kula and a chumrah. If you have an entire field of these little trees, on one hand, once it's an entire field, we saw a moment ago, there's no din that it's always usher and arla because everyone knows about it. But on the other hand, we're seeing that it would make usher a different species that was planted near it. And with that, we turn over to Mem Dalid. Amid Aleph says the Gemara another din. Maize taifes arba amos l'toma. Maize grabs hold of the 4 amos for toma. That anything within the dalet amos of a maize, the halacha is that we assume that there is toma there. V'tana tuna. And the Gemara comments on this. A chatzer of a kever, the courtyard of an area with different bodies that are buried. One who stands inside of the chatzer is tahar. Even though when you stand within 4 amos of a maize, the halacha we just said a moment ago is there is toma, you are tameh, but if it's in a chutzner, because the chutzner is considered a separate area, there will not be tumah in that area. And the Gemara comments to her, Divrei Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says that the chutzner has to be at least dalet amos big. Beis Hillel no, arba tfachim. It has to be 4 tfachim big. So says the Gemara, what is this then? Shepachsa mil mal, aval pachsa min atzad, divrei akol arba amos. Says the Gemara, if the entrance is above, and therefore, what is it? It's like a pit that you lower yourself down. That's when we saw the din that we just said. But pascha min atzad, if it's open from the side, that you have steps that are carved in to go into the kever, then divrei akol arba amos, it has to be dalet amos big, or else we're going to assume it's tummy. Says Gemara, what? Kabilayo, the exact opposite. Adarabba min atzad midrid. If the steps are from this side, then we have to be worried that what? Midrid v'nafak, that he's going to pull away as he walks out. Midrid v'nafak. Milmala, yevsha delay mile. Says the Gemara, it should be the exact opposite, that if it's above, so when you're coming out of the kever, you have to go through this area, then you're certainly going to pass by the kever, and therefore, in all scenarios, you should be tamei. Whereas if it's minat sad, you could stay away from the kever. Says the Gemara, 10 lines down, the first line is loy mahil ella. The exact opposite of bascha milmala, then arba amos. Everyone agrees it's 4 amos. Ani mi chatzer hakever. Says only by the chatzer of a kever the misaima mechitzas aval meis ba'alma tafis. Only if it's a proper kever. Then says the Gemara the misaima mechitzasa. Why? Because the mechitzas are definitive, and therefore you know where it is. But if it's just a stam me sitting there, then tafis, it's going to grab hold of the area 4 amos around it. And we continue quoting the Mishnah Miyash Asher Iris Isha, the different entities that the Kohen Meshuach Melchama teaches. Klal Yisrael, they do not have to go to battle if Asher Iris Isha, if someone married a woman. Tana Rabbanan, says the Gemara. Asher Iris, the pasuk says one who did Irisin, and we darshan Echad Maris is Mesula Echad Maris is Almana. Any form of Irisin, whether it's a Mesula, a girl who was never married, or an Almana of Echad Shemeris, you have a moral form of Yibum. Va'afilu Chamisha If there's 5 brothers and one of them dies in battle, and they all go back from the war. They all go back. Why? Because we have a potential situation of Yibum. Even though all 5 of them or 4 of them now cannot do Yibum, but they all have the potential exemption, they have the potential ability to do Yibum, therefore they all go back from the battle. Loy lakach, v'loy lacha. Instead of the pasuk saying loy lakach, what did it say? Loy lacha. He didn't take her. Prat, they come say, Skula almana lekayin gadol, gushav chalutza lekayin hadyet, mamzer tenetin Yisrael, bas Yisrael mamzer nesin. Then in all these cases, since the marriage is be'isr, therefore they are not exempt from going to battle, because this is not a marriage which is a kosher marriage. So continues the Gemara, we're about 15 lines down. The first one line is Mamzer ulin nisin. So says the Gemara, let's say that this final din that we just saw, that all these dinim of Kedushin be'isr does not exempt one from going to battle. Let's say this is not like the din of Rav Yossi Hai Galili. Di Rav Yossi Galili, Ha'amar, he says, Hayari virach levav, someone who's scared, Zeh hamisyari me'aveiros. That refers to one who's misyari, he's nervous of his aveiros, he doesn't go to battle, shaviyad in his hands. So says the Gemara, where do we see? We see, according to Yosef Glili, one who does an Isser, one who goes into a marriage with Isser, should come home. However, the Brisa says not that way. So seemingly this is not like Rav Yosef Glili. According to Yosef Glili, anyone who didn't have Eira shouldn't go to battle, and these people certainly didn't have Eira, as their entire marriage is be'isr. So that should itself be a reason not to go to battle. Answers the Gemara, no. That even in these situations where the marriage was be'isr, says Rabbah, there's only an obligation once there was relations between this husband and wife. Matam, what is the reason? Lo yikach mishum lo yechalel. The reason they can't get married is because of lo yechalel. You cannot profane them. Therefore, there's no malchus, there's actual attachment. And similar to our case, will only be if they actually were together, but not necessarily just the act of marriage. So it says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbana. We just finished saying that there's multiple reasons why one does not have to go to battle. One of them being you built a house, one of them being you have a vineyard, another one being you just got married. So says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. Asher bana, asher not, asher eres. The pasuk says 3 exemptions: someone who built a house, someone who planted a vineyard, planted a planting, and someone who got married. Limda Torah derech eretz. Through this statement, the Torah teaches derech eretz. Sheyivna adam bayis. First you plant a house, and then vayita kerem, and then you plant a vineyard. Va'achachis isha. And the final thing is to get married. Why? Because only once you're stable, once you have the appropriate income, then you're ready to get married. Shlomo in his wisdom said in Mishlei, prepare outside your work. So Shlomo Melech darshan similarly that first you have the job, first you have the house, and only afterwards you get married. Of Lazar, Davar Acher. Hachin bachos malachcha ze mikra vasida vasada lecha ze Mishnah. Acher benisa beisecha ze Gemara. So another way of darshing the pasuk goes mikra Mishnah and then Gemara. Davar Acher. Hachin bachos malachcha ze mikra Mishnah vasida vasada lecha ze Gemara. Acher benisa beisecha ilu maisim tovim. Different ways of darshaning what these psukim refer to. Now, Rav Lazar ben Oishav Yisek Lili Aimer, 6 lines on the white lines. Hachin bachos malachcha ze mikra Mishnah Gemara. Ve'asta basada lecha ilu maisim tovim. Acher benisa beisecha durosh vekabel schar. So we darshan the psukim slightly differently. All the different obligations of Torah that one has. And the Gemara continues with the next statement of the Mishnah. The following people do not go back to battle. Someone who built a gatehouse, etc. Tana says the Gemara, if he added even 1 row of bricks, then he does return home, because his whole house is considered like a new house, and therefore he does not go to battle. He also does not have to go back. Tana, we learned in the Mishnah on the first white line, the reason being, why don't you go back, says the Gemara, because the they were compelled to rebuild the house 2 times in every 7 years, and therefore the house wasn't considered a really permanent structure, as it's going to be rebuilt, and therefore it's not going to have the same level of simcha that will generate the exemption from going to battle. And the Gemara continues on the first why law, if you already slept in the house, you already married the wife, etc. Sotah Rabbanan, Isha chadash ein li eli Isha chadash alman gusha minayin tamaloi mar Isha mikol makam imkem atam laver Isha Chadsha misha chadsha loy yatsa machzu shasa shein chadsha loy. Says the Gemara. No, excuse me. We come in kin matam misha chadsha misha chadasha loy. Someone who's new to him, which comes to exclude him machzu shasa shein chadasha loy. It's not new to this man, as he's already been married to this woman, and therefore he's not going to get an exemption from the battle. Tana Rabbanan continues the Gemara. Lo yaitze basava. One should not go out with the army. Yachal basava. One would think he should not go out with the army. Aval yasik ma'im mazoin. But he should supply food and water to the troops. He should do at least a little bit that he could. V'yitkan adrachim, and he should fix the road. Tamalemer v'lo ya'avar alav l'chol davar. Nothing. So Yachal, you would think shani marbe ava aboyna bayis lo yichanchoy not to carry him lo yichaloi. Aras ishav lo ylacha tamaloy mar alav yatamaver aval atamaver lachirim mumei achar the gossip lo yavar lo yitze besava lamali lavar alav vishnei lavin. So the reason we're going to have 2 different lavin teaching us the same din, the iser that is upon discussion. We'll continue with a new Mishnah on the bottom of Memdalid Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Vayosfu Ashoitin Ladaber La'am, and the officers add on, they speak to the nation and they say, Miyoyesh Yarach, that's afraid and faint of heart, he goes back home. So says the Gemara, what is this pasuk referring to? We have a 3-way machlokes. Rav Kiva Omer Ayarav Alach Levav Kimashmoi Sheni Acholam Oid Bekishrei Al Melchama. He's not able to stand and the difficulties of war, of Leroy's Charev Shalufa, and he can't see the unsheathed sword. He's dumb, he's nervous of battle, the bullets, the guns. Rav Yisek Lili Omer Yervach Levav Zeh HaMisyarei Min HaVeiroi Shaviyadi. He's afraid of the Aveiros that he's done, the Fikach Tulsa, Lo Yatares Kola Elu Shiyachzu Bigla Lan. And therefore, because he's nervous, says Rav Yisek Lili, all the other cases, building, planting, marry, they're all totally on him, meaning they're all so that the person who did Aveiros should go back. I mean, this is almost like the group of all the Aveiros that he's a Yarich and Alach Levav, says Rav Yisek Lili. Rav Yossi Omer, the third opinion, Almana l'kain Gad l'gusha v'chutz l'kain yadim amzeres v'nisina v'yisrael v'yisrael l'mamzin v'sin harei hu ha'yareh v'alach levav. We continue with the psukim, that what does the Torah say? 2 lines on the bottom, v'hayon, it was. When he finished speaking to the people of Aktu Sarei Savais, and they appoint a leader in front of the people. What does it mean? Actually, the Mishnah adds on. What does it mean? It means to the back of the people. That they would put people both in the front and in the back, so that people wouldn't want to raid from the army. Ma'amidin zekifim lifneim explains the Mishnah we just said, that what? They would place a zekifim. They would place those who are upright. Ma'amidim, zekifim. They would put someone there that he could be zakaf, he could straighten one who would fall lifneim in the front. Machareim, and they would stand the others behind the army. And they would have iron axes in the hand. And what would happen? Anyone who would try to turn around and run, he would just be as shoikov, to sever his legs. Meaning, they had a chance to leave. Once, if they didn't leave and they already started going to battle, now it is too late, and they would ensure that no one would leave the war. Continues the Mishnah as we turn over to Mem Dalid Amid Beis, Shetchilas Nisa Nefila. Because the beginning of a flight is a Nefila, is a downfall. Shenamar, as the Pasuk says, Nos Yisrael of Ne Pelishtim, that Klal Yisrael fell in front of the Pelishtim, Begam Magifa Gedola Haisabam, and there was a terrible plague that was in the people. And a different pasuk says, "Ve'enusu anshi Yisrael b'mnei Pelishtim," that they ran away. Ve'yapilu chalalim. So we see that what happens, running away, is the beginning of the downfall. And we continue in the Mishnah, Bamed Dvar Mamurim, when is this said? Bamed Dvar Mamurim b'milchamois harishos, optional battles. Avu b'ilchamois mitzvah kol yoitzin, meaning the entire Mishnah, we should say the entire few Mishnahs that we dealt with all the different exemptions of battle, says the Mishnah, that's only if it's a Melchama of Rishos. But if the Melchama is a mitzvah, if it's a battle that Hashem told Klal Yisrael, for example, conquering Eretz Yisrael, B'mois Yeshua, as Rashi 3 lines on the top points out, then everyone goes to the battle, Afilu Chasan Mechedroi V'kalu Mechupasli, straight from the Chasana, the Chasan and Kala are obligated to go to battle. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Medvar Mamurim, when is this? B'melchamois mitzvah. B'melchamois chayva kol yotz afilu chasan mechadroi v'kala bechupasai. Says Rabbi Yehuda, no, these are all referring to melchames mitzvah, but melchames chayva, that's different. Now, what does it mean? Melchames chayva, the Gemara is going to explain, meaning a moment ago we explained that melchamte shel mitzvah is when Hashem told them to go. So how is the melchames chayva more than that? The Gemara is going to explain. But before we get there, we dive into the first part of the Mishnah, which is three-way machlokes. What does it mean? Hayari varach levav. Ma iko bin Rav Yosef Glili. What is the difference between the second and third opinion? The Mishnah explains the Gemara iko beinayu aveira derabanan, and aveira derabanan that according to Rav Yosef Glili, he does not have to go to the battle. According to Rav Yosef, he does. Kaman azla hadatanya. Who does the following brisa go according to? That says as follows. It's going to give us a big chizik in a lot of the unfortunate things that sometimes we do. Sach bein tefila litfila. Someone speaks between putting on the tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh, but he didn't say another bracha. Of course, if he said another bracha, that would rectify his issue. Averi biyadei v'chayzer. And he goes back from a battle. Come on, this is going according to the opinion of Yisrael Glili, like we just said. It's a din d'Rabbanan, but being over on a din d'Rabbanan is also enough that you cannot go to battle. Continues to go. Mantan lo tan Rabbanan. Shama kol kranais vertia hagafe vertia. So when he hears the voice of sounds of trumpets and he gets scared, hagafes terisin vertia, the clashing of the shields, and he gets scared. Sechsuach achar. And he hears the swords, or he sees the swords, and he has an accident. The water is dripping down his legs, literally. Chayzer Keman. Whose opinion is this? As the Gemara, let's say it's Rav Akiva who says, as we said in the Mishnah, the first opinion, that what it means, he's afraid of the battle, the swords, the shields, the bullets. Says the Gemara, no. Says the Gemara, even if Yosef Glili admits, in this case he does not have to go to battle. Why not? Because the pasuk continues. So there comes out that the machlokes between Rav Akiva and Rav Yosef Glili is just going to be, what is the makar? Do we learn out from a Yari Varach Levav if you're scared of the mundane parts of the battle? Or Rav Yosef Glili learns out let his heart not melt due to like his brother's heart. That's where Rav Yosef Glili is going to learn out from, but they're both going to agree that at the end of the day, if someone is afraid of the physical battle, the swords, the shields, etc., he's not going to have to go to war. And we wrap up the parak. Says the Gemara, we are about 15 lines to the end of the parak. First one line is V'loi, v'aya kechalais ha'shaytrim. And it was when the Shaitim finished speaking, says the Gemara, that afterwards what would happen, that if anyone tried to run out of battle, then he would get hit by these axes. And the Mishnah said at the top of the Amud over here, Shetchilas Nisa is Nefila. The beginning of runaway is a downfall. So says the Gemara, Says the Gemara, it sounds backwards. The Mishnah said the beginning of flight is a downfall. Says the Gemara, it should be the opposite. The beginning of a downfall is running away. It sounds like that by running away, that's the downfall of the person. So the Mishnah is backwards. Answers the Gemara, Mi bayile ema, mi bayile. Says Mara, you're right. The beginning of the downfall is running away. You have to change the words in the Mishnah. So now we get involved in the end of the Mishnah. At the end of the Mishnah, we had a machlokes. We had a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda And the Tanakama learned B'chemes mitzvah everyone has to go, and Rav Yehuda says no, B'chemes chayva everyone has to go. But they both give the same example of a chasam echadre v'kal meichu pasei. So what is this machlokes in Rav Yehuda and the Tanakama? Amar Rav Yochanan Rishos de Rabbanon Zui mitzvah de Rav Yehuda. Says Rav Yochanan, the Rishos de Rabbanon, that is what Zui mitzvahs de Rav Yehuda. That's when Rav Yehuda said Melchamatoi shel mitzvah, which is not a chiyuv. Mitzvah de Rabbanon Zui chayva de Rav Yehuda. Whereas a mitzvah de Rabbanon, that's Rav Yehuda called a chiyuv. So the Gemara is explaining there's two levels of de Rabbanon. So there's a Rishos, it's an optional thing to do, and then there's a mitzvah de Rabbanon. That is what Rav Yehuda calls a chayva. So the Gemara is explaining that when Rav Yehuda and Mishnah argued on the Tanakama, it's about this detail that he's arguing about. Tanakama said any Melchamte shel mitzvah. So Rav Yehuda is coming along and saying that the difference is going to be whether it's a Rishos or whether it's a mitzvah. Amar Rava, comes along Rava, and Rava explains, Melchames Yeshua lekavich tever kol chayva. So now we're going to get real and explain what exactly, in the words of Milchama, what's the din? So says Rava, if it's a Melchames Yeshua, when Yeshua went to conquer Eretz Yisrael, everyone agrees that's a chayva, meaning everyone's going to agree that everyone has to go. Melchames Beis David l'Ravcha, when David HaMelech wanted to expand Eretz Yisrael, Tivir Kol Rishos, everyone agrees that is optional, and in such a scenario, the chassan will not have to go mechadara in the kal mechupasoi. So what is the machlokes? The mu'utei oivdei koichavim deloy leisu elayu. The machlokes is going to be when Klal Yisrael goes out to battle to get rid of the goyim, so that they don't come and attack us. A preemptive war. Mar karilei mitzvah. Rav Yehuda calls this a mitzvah, not a chayva. So not everyone's going to have to go. Umar, whereas the Tanakam the Chachamim kari rishos. Nafkamina loisik b'mitzvah shepater mina mitzvah. The difference is going to be, according to Rav Yehuda, they're doing a mitzvah. According to the Rabbanan, they are not. It's only called a rishos. So according to Rav Yehuda, meaning they're both agreeing that with regard to this din, the chassan and the kala are not going to go. They're both agreeing that these are not at the level that, according to the Chachamim, it's a mitzvah and Rav Yehuda a chayva. So the Gemara now says, so what's the nafkamina? The whole nafkamina we thought is when the chassan and kala have to go as well. But now you're explaining to me that either it's a rishus or a mitzvah. A rishus according to the Tanakama, a mitzvah according to Rav Yehuda. But according to Tanakama, chassan only goes for a mitzvah. According to Rav Yehuda, it's only a chayva. So what is the nafkamina? Nafkamina is it called a mitzvah to pater you for another mitzvah? Rav Yehuda is going to say yes. Tanakama is going to say no. Hajon aloch meshuach Melchama, lots of Egadata definitely calls, well, everything calls for a Chazara. And now we begin the 9th parak as we close in the final few days, Baruch Hashem, of this Masechta, the final parak of this Masechta. We're going to begin the parak of Egla Arufa by just learning the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Egla Arufa, and really this is a continuation of that which we saw in the previous Mishnayos, which is what lishoines, what language you have to say different passages of the Torah. So says the Mishnah, Egla Arufa b'lashon hakodesh nemar ki yimati cholo ba'adama v'yatz zekinecha v'shavtecha, and the zekinim and the shaftim go out, shleishim b'bezdin hagadol sheb'yishlayim ha'yotz, and they will go out. Rav Yehuda Eimer, that says Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, and the Gemara obviously is going to say, as I'm wondering and explaining, that the pasuk doesn't talk about anything about Lashon HaKodesh. The Gemara will get there tomorrow. So 3 for the Bezei Gadol of Yerushalayim would go out. Rav Yehuda Eimer Chamisha the Bezei Gadol. Shneimar Zekinecha Shnayim Shevtecha Shnayim Vein Bezin Shakol So Meitzalei Oid Echad. So how many people went out is a machlekes number 2 in the Mishnah. So din number 1 is that Egla Arufa said in Lashon HaKodesh. Din number 2 is how many people would go out for this din of Egla Arufa. Rav Yehuda says it was 5, whereas Tanakama says it was 3. Nimsa Tamun Bigal. So you find this Egla Arufa, which is brought, you decapitate the head, as we're going to see when you find a corpse lying between 2 cities. So we begin with the basic halachas that says the Mishnah, if you find the corpse, Tamun Bigal, piled in a heap of stones, or hanging from a tree, or floating on the water, then there is no din of egla arufa. Why not? The body has to be found in the ground. So we darshan the pasuk that has to be found on the ground. And finally, we conclude the Mishnah. What's another case where there's no agla rufa? Nimsa samach l'sap, or near the town or the year to the city. Sharuba kamors gayim. Olir shein bazin, there's no bazin. Then loy arif, there's no din agla rufa. Ein a moedin el eir shegish bazin. You only measure the corpse from a town that there is a bazin. And the Gemara Mir Tashem is going to begin by telling us where we see that it's din in Lashon HaKodesh, number one, and number two, where do we see all these different dinim when we know there is a din of agla rufa when there is not.